everybody. So, y'all know I'm kind of relatively new to this YouTube thing, but there's just been something that has been on my mind that has actually been very much a part of my life for some time now. Well, at least since the week of Thanksgiving. I remember it very clearly. And I kept debating about whether or not I should share it or whatever, but you know what? It's 2023. Fuck it. If people don't care enough about how they behave, then let's do this. So, I started a job at a new school. I relocated for my own reasons. um, I teach history, and I've been doing it, teaching for about 11 years now. So I was called into the office of basically the high school principal. I teach ninth and 11th grade currently, but I've taught fourth, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, and 12th. Electives, world history, U.S. history. I have taught all of it, okay? Like, I have had a span. All right, I say that to say my resume does speak for itself, and so does my ability to stay in education, because trust me, it's not as fun as people may think. Oh, you get the summer off? Yeah, because I do 9 months work in 12 months. But anyway, I was called into the office the week of Thanksgiving, right, by the upper school principal, who is a black woman, and by the chair of my department, who is a white man. Now that I've had time to think about it, this is not the first time I've seen this sort of setup where there's a white man in the room who may have a position in administration and a person of color, a woman of color. And they both gotten together, canoodled, and decided they're going to kind of tell you what is wrong with you. Now, before I start, I had my official evaluation on this job in October, the end of October. Both of these people that I'm telling you called me in for a meeting, did my observations, wrote them up, submitted them. It was like 6 pages worth of their notes on my teaching, none of which came back as negative. It couldn't. You're watching me interact with these kids. And granted, there's always room for improvement, right? Okay. But that wasn't in my write up. And it was 6 pages worth. And from what I understand, that's much longer than what people normally give for an observation. Of course, the black person is always under the microscope, right? All right. Anyway, so I was emailed by the upper school principal that morning, said she wanted to give me some feedback. And I'm thinking, feedback? My observation's been over for a month. What are you talking about? So she asked me to meet with her during like regularly scheduled office hour times. That's where the kids can actually come in and meet with me. And I told her, like, I couldn't do the time she requested because I had 2 students coming to make up a test. And that is school a lot of time for that, right? So I asked my chair, because he was on the email chain, which was already some fuck shit, right? Um, what the meeting was about, why is she emailing me about, feedback? And he gave me some short answer and said, well, she just wants to meet with you about feedback. Duh. I know what the fuck feedback means. Like, what is this about? So I told him, well, I read that part, and that I understood that much, but what was the feedback for or on? Because I already had my teacher evaluation, if you know, since you're on the email chain. And at this point, I was just getting confused and kind of feeling like, okay, where's this going? Like, and it was a cryptic message, and cryptic messages often cause me anxiety anyway, especially when it comes in relation to my job performance, and because I have had some really bad experiences as usually the only African American person, and in this case, the only African American full time teacher in the entire high school. I've had some really rough experiences that I've learned from and how to push back at people when I'm asking questions and, standing up for myself. But I had to learn that. I didn't get that overnight, right? So I can totally understand. So I still have these sort of like this workplace trauma. And then people keep adding to it. All right. So I asked my chair like several times, well, throughout the day, like, what's the feedback about? And he said something to the effect, from what I understand, she has data. And I'm like, data? What the fuck are they talking about? And it was apparent that these two had met before this meeting to discuss this feedback. All right, and after about 9 email exchanges that fucking day of us trying to figure out a time to meet, I sent an email, said, is this an emergency or something? That is there something I should know as I proceed with my day, in case something going wrong with the kid or something, whatever. Um, so this is the thing. She doesn't respond. My kids get done with their test early, so I come to my chair and I said, "Well, can we just go and see if we can meet with her now?" I'm not sure how long it'll take, but I said, "But since I'm not getting any answers from you, I'd like to figure out, what's going on." Okay. So she begins to tell me that there was a survey taken, a survey, okay, amongst the ninth grade students about my course. First of all, you shouldn't be giving out any surveys about my course without my knowledge. Two, turns out the survey she was talking about was not a survey about my course. It was one they had given out to the ninth graders like at the beginning of October, right? I'm going somewhere with this. And she goes, well, so I said, I was like, well, what survey? And she was like, well, it's a survey that me and the dean of students sent out. Dean of students wasn't in that meeting and she wasn't on the email chain, but it's another white woman, but whatever. I mean, I don't expect a lot of backup in these sort of things. So she begins to tell me that there's a narrative going on about me. So I said, okay, well, what is it? And she then said, well, there's some language that the students used that was charged. This is a black woman, okay? This is the upper school principal, who's the only other black person with a PhD. And by the end of this meeting, it was clear to me she wants to be the only one there too. Okay? Yeah. So she was like, well, it was pretty charged, so I won't read it. And I said, no. I said, well, since you brought me down to your office and you want to have a meeting about it, I need you to read me exactly what they wrote, because that's the only way I can know what's going on. And I haven't been getting answers so far, even in this meeting. So I said, and if it's that serious, I don't want to walk back into my class blindsided, right? So still, this survey I'm thinking is like something recent or whatever. So she began to read off what some students had said, which was that I was aggressive. Any black woman living and breathing with half a conscience already, from hearing this, should be a little triggered, because we know what that means. Black women who assert themselves are aggressive. White women who assert themselves are, wow, look at her classroom management. She's so strong. It's always different. And as a black woman, you should know better. And as a black woman, you do know better. A word that's often used to describe her. She was like, well, yeah, I think some of the language is coded. So some of you are probably listening like, well, maybe she's trying to help you. No. All right. So then she was like, and some of them said you were strict. And I'm a teacher. And they're in ninth grade. Yes, you do have to sit down and take your notes and not play with your nails. Like, okay. She was like, well, I think we don't even use that word here. I just think that may be code for something else. Something in my spirit called bullshit then. So she was like, well, and then there was a quote from one student that said, I used to love going to history. Now I dread going. The other quote from a student was, I don't think she likes me. And something along the lines of, she said for me to stop being interested in my nails and take my notes. Okay, first of all, as a history teacher, I'm just going to go ahead and keep it all the way real. There are so many kids that dread history. And there are so many kids that have come out of my class year after year after year and say they have a newfound love for it. But two, those who don't, it's okay. They're going from the 8th grade, middle school, to 9th grade, high school. Yeah, it is going to be a transition. And you're telling me one kid said they dread going to history? Shit, I'm shocked it wasn't more, right? So I'm thinking this in my head. So forgive me, but I don't think redirecting a student's attention to their work is a bad thing for a teacher to do if you're playing with your nails and we're supposed to be taking notes and preparing for a test. Like, what the hell? So I said, well, how many students have said these things? And she replied, well, about half a dozen. So I said, 6. She was like, about half a dozen. 6. And so I said 6 back there. She was like, enough to be a pattern. Okay. At the time in my head, I'm thinking, you call me down here for 6 kids. Two said I was aggressive. One said I was strict. One said that they didn't like the fact that I asked them to stop playing with their nails. One said they dread going to history. I'm thinking to myself, the fuck are you telling me this bullshit for? 6 kids. At the time, I only thought I had 25 ninth graders. I went back and looked at my roster. I have 28. So apparently the other 22 don't matter. Okay? Thank you. All right. So half a dozen children saying negative things is not a pattern. Because these half dozen children are not even saying the same thing. You gave them a survey to whine and complain about their ninth grade classes. And I have advisory. They complain about physics all the time. But you're calling the one black person their first year because y'all can't retain African American faculty. And you're calling me in for this fuck shit? Okay, well, my chair sits there like a goddamn statue. After both of them have written up my teacher observation, you call me down here for this bullshit the week of Thanksgiving? So, I'm getting mad all over again. So I said, well, half a dozen children is not a pattern. And I did push back and I asked questions like, when did this survey take place? Why did it take place without my knowledge as a teacher? What was the purpose? I cannot get any solid answers, bumbling around with her words and all this other shit. She had the right black person. And I'm sitting up here because I'm trying to still contain myself. I'm talking about it differently, obviously, in the video. But like, I'm still kind of trying to contain myself because, you know, the minute you react, see, there you go. She was aggressive, right? It's all the parts black women have to play. All right. And as far as I'm concerned, she's a black Karen and I don't like her. All right. In case that wasn't clear. All right. I'm not finished with the story, but I just want to make sure I'm letting you know. All right. So to be sure, this wasn't like the formal survey that goes out at the end of a semester, like the one that we recently got that I couldn't give my students because, well, my name is not Ashley. Y'all have two black people. One that's in the lower school, the elementary school, and one that's in the bus. It's a private school, so it's like K through 12. Y'all couldn't get us right? Okay, anyway. So this black high school principal continues. Well, there's this narrative about you, and I felt like you should know. And I said, okay, well, now that I know, what do you want me to do about it? Like, if this is a narrative that you feel like is a pattern, what do you think I should do to improve in the classroom? Because you've done my teaching observation, so I need to know. Okay? And she said, well, you know, I'm not interested in being prescriptive. So it's like telling somebody how to do something. So I said, well, I would like to know what you would expect me to do because you obviously have called this meeting because you think the problem is serious. You call somebody into a sit-down meeting, a teacher, not a child, but a fucking teacher, right? The black teacher, 3 months into her job, after you've done a teaching observation where you have talked about how incredible my classes are. And that, I mean, what else could you be trying to do other than create a scenario and situation where I won't want to stay because you want to be the only one? I see you. Okay? So she said, well, I just wanted to let you know that there was this narrative about you. And I'm thinking to myself, all this shit I heard people say about you from colleagues, like how you asked as an icebreaker the chairs of the different departments at the school what their sexual fantasies were and why there are faculty who definitely heard about it and definitely wanted to know why you weren't fired last year. Ma'am, I really don't think you want to go there. And had you not been their black person and their token black person at that. And when I use the word token, I'm not talking about the only black person on the job. Because let me tell you something, that's not an easy space to be in. I'm talking about black people who enjoy being the only one when I say token. That's what I mean. Okay? So she kept rereading these comments from 6 students out of what I realized was 28 and insisted this was a pattern. So I asked, well, what are the parents saying? Right? Because I want to know. I know how this game is played, right? She said nothing. And this is a quote, nothing. So I asked her again, assuming my question wasn't clear. I said, but what are the complaints you've heard from even not just the 9th grade parents, but the 11th grade parents if you think this is a pattern? They had only surveyed 9th graders, but I was like, well, maybe there's something applicable here. And she was like, because I presumed my question was wrong. She responded, nothing. I haven't heard anything from any parents. Okay. Let me explain to you all. I work at a private school, which means people pay tuition. A private school where people pay tuition, and you mean to tell me no parent has even contacted the administration about these so-called complaints and narratives? And I had parent-teacher conferences 2 weeks before that went off without a hitch with ninth grade students. This is the way people create a problem. This is why I call her a black fucking Karen. Okay? And yes, my white chair sitting there who said absolutely nothing, but who had clearly had a meeting with her before this, that was pissing me off too. Because he didn't step in either. And he clearly had canoodles with her about this. And I remember walking in the day before, walking into the room where it was faculty, and as soon as she saw me, she turned her head and like almost like a kid does when they're like ashamed. And I was thinking to myself, that's weird. And then in a similar, different instance that same day, my chair acted like that, and I was like, "What the fuck is wrong with these people?" But you know how you see something weird, and then it starts making sense later, and that to me was just it. To me, it's so pathetic, right? So contextualize this, like I told you, parent-teacher conferences with all without a hitch, and that is not a given. That is a miracle from God, okay? And so I assumed I said, well, if there were any potential issues, this would have come up during then when the parents actually had opportunity to talk to me directly. So, and I can tell you, as a teacher, what happens, it's not that them kids probably didn't say these sort of things to their parents. Their parents probably said, okay, all right. And then just didn't think anything else of it. If they really thought their child, their little white child, was being abused by their aggressive black teacher, trust and believe, they will be showing their entire ass. I've also seen that done. And I'm not just talking about me, but black teachers in these environments, right? So she then proceeds, Black Karen, to say, well, we had some concerns about your personality when we hired you. I thought it may be good with the older kids, but not so much with the younger ones. Okay. Private school teaching jobs are often competitive. Private school teaching jobs where you have no black people on the faculty, where they would probably prefer it that way, but they have a black upper school director, they don't really need you, okay? To be clear. And it was in the midst of hiring season. And these people didn't give me the 48-hour turnaround. I asked for like 2 weeks to make my decision about whether or not I wanted to come there. Because I have options. And I chose this place based on what I thought was good for me and my family and that kind of thing. It's nevertheless, okay, this still happened. So I replied to her as a saying, well, your personality. I said, well, let me be clear. I've taught 4th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. So this isn't my first time teaching the 9th grade. And I am aware of the difficulty of the transition from 8th to 9th grade. And that can be different for them. But I also think these sort of complaints from this half dozen, 6 students, is not an indictment on my teaching. Matter of fact, your comment. Now, I'm telling you all this. This is not what I said, but I did tell her about all the grades that I've taught. So I said, I'm very much aware of that. So it's not like I've never had this experience. As she's telling me this, she goes, well, that's why I don't teach the 9th grade. I haven't taught the 9th grade. First of all, you don't hardly teach now. You teach one semester in a class that you like on Toni Morrison. And it's an elective course to which only seniors can sign up for. And you do it in the fall because seniors get lazy in the spring. And you've never taught 9th grade, but you're going to tell me what I'm doing wrong? Ma'am, you are out of order. And my chair has never taught 9th grade at any point in his career. And has been at this school for 10 years. Exactly. Okay? So I guess the short of the long story is, I pondered over this for a while. Because I felt cornered and ambushed. Right? Like, I'm like, why are they like this is an emergency? And mind you, the survey they were talking about, they took that like before, not only before Thanksgiving, but like probably before even Halloween. So I walked out of that meeting feeling ambushed, where you were reading off complaints from 6 kids. And then I said, well, what did the other kids have to say? Oh, it was the complete opposite. So 22 other kids saying good things wasn't worthy of a at a girl in an email. That shit just reeked of so much immaturity. One, because you're entertaining the complaints of 14 and 15-year-olds. 14-year-olds turning 15. Okay? You're giving me this information the week of Thanksgiving. And you're doing this to the black person because that's the point. It's easy to do on a job like this when you're the only one. And when most people will believe a black woman is aggressive, despite all the aggression pointed at me on a daily basis for being a good teacher, for being a black woman who's a good teacher and who you were not prepared for students to appreciate. And you see yourself in competition with me. That much was fucking clear to me. So I'm going to get hysterical and create some sort of situation because let me tell you something. If you really thought that, you would have been a grown fucking woman as an upper school principal called me into your office and told me what the fuck you needed to tell me. And then told me how to improve it if you were really interested in the education of these students. So when I asked you for feedback on how to improve it and you didn't give me anything, and then your dumbass admit you never taught ninth grade. Ever. I taught ninth grade several years before this. And I taught eighth grade because I was at another K through 12 school. So I've had this experience. So don't tell me that somehow like you can't. This is not about the kids. This was about trying to degrade me professionally. And I talked to my therapist about this because I wanted to make sure that maybe I wasn't overreacting. And you know how sometimes you hope you're overreacting because it's easier for you to fix your own behavior than somebody else's? But no, and this is the problem with having black people like that on the job. And she's like in her 50s, so she's still young enough, but she's looking for headship jobs. And this is, when we talk about narratives, okay, so the white people you're not calling in your office and who were talking about you and how you were looking for headships and how you lied about how there are no transgender students at this particular school I'm at, when they asked you about how to deal with, you know, policies around supporting transgender students, so on and so forth. And you say, oh, we don't have any. And somebody from that board of that school in New England texted one of the teachers I'm colleagues with when I told them this story about how I felt ambushed because I wanted to do my due diligence and go over it. And the teacher, who is white and who also teaches history in ninth grade, and I said, well, you know, she said these things. As soon as I said the word aggressive, this white woman literally did just like this. Are you kidding me? She had the nerve to do that. She said, that is so racially charged. That's incredible. I can't even believe she brought it up to you like you were the problem. She should know better. She was like, and considering the instances she's had around here, that's when I found out about her asking people about their sexual fantasies in a chairs meeting. Okay? And the other stuff she's done. Okay? So, miss me with the black Karens, the ones who are in that age range. Never mind, I'm not going to say that age range because there are black people like that. They want to be the only black person on the job and they think that's a flex. That's not a flex. I'm telling you that I'm the only black person. I typically am in the history department. Once again, because a lot of people don't like to study history and are discouraged from pursuing jobs in history as far as teaching. One, because there's an emphasis on STEM. But two, there's so many people, particularly of color, that don't see themselves in the curriculum growing up that they just want to get it over with. All right, so there are lots of systemic things that are going on. And she's the same black person, as she can observe my class. She was like, well, they seem to respond to it really well because, you know, most of the kids are white. And she was like, and they use words black and white often. And I was like, why wouldn't they? It's a U.S. history class, 11th grade. It's about race. The history of the U.S., they have to understand race. I said, no, they can't be afraid to mention those words. And yes, we are talking about the power of chattel slavery. She was like, well, you know, that kind of stuff can get you in trouble. I'm thinking to myself, what kind of house slave? What do you mean? And I don't mean because house slaves, that's not what I mean. It like in a very broad Malcolm X sense. Like, because that's not true. House slaves will poison masters and that kind of thing. But I just mean, like, what kind of slave mentality is wrong with you? Get me in trouble. How? So I said, well, have you heard from parents? No, I haven't. I said, so what do you mean get me in trouble? Well, I just mean, you're very direct. Very direct. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, because I have a PhD in this stuff. I said, well, just like I mentioned to the kids in class, this is the book I get it from, Stand from the Beginning. Angela Davis, Race in Class. Howard Zinn's, A People's History of the United States. I said, I'm not making this stuff up. And I give them the sources so they can go back and look for this information if they are more interested or even care to challenge it. Because I think that's a healthy thing. And it was so, and I think at this point, she didn't get that headship job. And I think the week of Thanksgiving, because you normally would know that's usually announced between October and December in private schools. So more than likely, she probably got rejected from that. And that's just the one I know about. And I think this is the opportunity to take it out on somebody. I was the opportunity. And creating hysteria or trying to create a situation around my teaching to make me, one, feel like I'm not good at it. 2, to make me feel unwelcomed in the space. And 3, to ensure that you're going to be the only black person on the job is fucking pathetic. But a person who hasn't had this experience would be deeply bothered, traumatized, uncomfortable. And I'm not taking anything off my white chair who didn't say anything. Because his silence was complete complicity. He had already had that conversation. But it wasn't helpful. In fact, it was being used to degrade me professionally and to put me in a situation. So I went to talk to the associate head of school about this. Yeah, I did. You want to know why? Because at that point, that instinct in me to try to, not say nothing else about the other black person on the job, or just go, even if you do think what they're saying is true or actually agree with it, I try not to do that. Because a lot of times people's motives for doing that to black people, regardless of whether I like them, it's bullshit. Right? It's bullshit. And I don't want to undermine my black presence on this job. And I want you to know not to bring certain things to me. But at that point, I know the game you're playing. I wanted it documented. That's why I sent it in the email before I had a meeting with the associate head of school, who sent me back an email and said, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't want you to feel unprotected here. This, that, and the other. And I'm like, whatever. They probably all had these conversations. 2, and I said, you're welcome to come to my class anytime and observe, just like I told the upper school principal. You can come and see and make those determinations. So this way, if anything comes up with the parents, oh, well, they didn't get any calls from parents. I said, I know. I said, but if anything comes up, then at least you all can speak on my behalf because you've been in those classes. Like, and I'm still pissed off about it, and I have to go back to school this week, and I'm just like, you know what? Fuck it. I just need to get this off my chest, and I just hope somebody's gonna be like, well, why don't you quit that job? I understand your sentiments, but I still have to pay my bills. In the meantime, okay, that's why. But anyway, yeah, so Black Karens, I'm not here for them. And I just wanted to share this, one, because I wanted to get off my chest. But 2, I know there are other people who experience these kind of things, and it's frustrating. And sometimes then you feel like embarrassed when people are like, why aren't you working for a black organization? Well, this is where I got a job. Like it's layered, but whatever. I'm going to get through it. Praying that God will get me through this, and I'm going to hang in there. See y'all later. Bye.